It has been said that Britain and North America are two countries separated by the same language. How true do you think that is? And what do you think an American from New York thinks about the way I speak English as a native English speaker from London? In this podcast, you'll meet my friend Bill, who's an American. And together, Bill and I discuss some of the main differences in the way we both speak English. Welcome to Aprender Inglés with Bill and Craig. Hello, and if you are a new listener to the podcast, you are very, very welcome. My name's Craig, and I have yet another guest this week so that you can listen to a wide variety of accents. Actually, this conversation was recorded quite a long time ago. It was hiding in the corner of my computer collecting dust, and I found it last week. Now, if you've been wondering where my permanent co-host is, Reza, well, he's currently in Belfast visiting his family, and hopefully he'll be back on the podcast very, very soon. Now, just one quick announcement before you listen to Bill and me. The next Conversation Masterclass course is starting very soon on the 16th of August the 16th. So, if you hear this before August the 16th and you want to improve your speaking fluency with me and a small group of lovely, lovely students, there are still some places left on the course. Go to englishmasterclass.net, englishmasterclass.net, and join the email list, and I will contact you with more details. If you don't have a pen and paper with you, you can't write down englishmasterclass.net, I will put a link in the show notes at inglespodcast.com/427. And now, without further ado, here's my conversation with Bill, in which we talk about some grammar differences and differences with common idioms between British and American English. What differences are there between American English grammar and British English grammar? We're going to find out in this week's podcast, because this week we have a very special guest. Bill is a longtime friend who's come to visit me over here in Spain, and for you, you're going to hear an American accent because Bill is from North America. Bill, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Where do you live now, and where do you think your accent's from?
I live in a small town called Sleepy Hollow, about 40 minutes north of Manhattan. And some of your listeners may be familiar with a famous story called The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, written by Washington Irving. So I live in that area. I grew up just east of New York City in an area called Long Island. And I can easily revert into a Long Island accent if I really want to, but I prefer not to.
But when you speak normally, is that where you'd say your accent's from? Because do you think you have a typically New York accent?
I don't know. I think if I'm very tired, people will more identify my accent as being from New York. But it's hard to know. When you listen to yourself, it's hard to tell whether or not you have an accent. I would suppose people could tell that I'm from New York, but I certainly don't have a heavy New York accent in the way that some people would easily identify it.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. I've known you for years, and you don't come across to me as someone who has a very strong New York accent. Maybe that becomes from years of traveling and being around foreigners, perhaps.
Could be. I also studied theater, and so it was taught to us how to control your voice and how to control your inflections and how you speak.
Yeah. Okay, well, today we're looking specifically at grammar differences, but to begin, I'd like to look at some vocabulary differences. Now, if you would like more vocabulary differences between British English and American English, you can go back to a podcast I did with my friend Danny. And to find that, go to inglespodcast.com/Danny. But before we actually get into grammar more, can you think of any examples, Bill, of where the vocabulary differences between British and American English? Which words come to mind that are commonly used? Let's put you on the spot.
You put me no, look, I think there are some differences that I can think of in pronunciation, such as the word that's spelled schedule, which in America we would pronounce schedule, and in Britain you would pronounce how?
Schedule.
Right. So there are pronunciation differences. I know that there are others. That's the one that just pops into my mind right now. I'm sure over the course of this conversation, we may come up with others.
Okay, well, let's look more specifically at grammar, because one thing I'd like to look at are differences that I've noticed, and let's see if you agree. Let me ask you a question, Bill. Do you like the band U2?
Sure.
Would you say that U2 is a good band or U2 are a good band?
I would say that the correct English way to say that would be that U2 is a good band.
Well, that's one difference, I think, between American English and British English. Because with collective nouns like band, for example, in American English, you would say is because you look at it as a singular collective noun. But in British English, if we think of the individual members of U2 separately, then we might say they are a good band. So we think of Bono, we think of, what's the guitar player?
The Edge.
The Edge. So if we think of them individually, we might say are. What about family? Because I very often think of my family as individual people, my sister, my mother, my brother. So I would say my family are coming. Would you?
No. Family, while it refers to a collective, the noun itself is singular because the noun itself can be pluralized. You have a family. There are many families in the room. So to talk about a single family, you would say, my family is coming. However, our families are coming together for the holidays.
So that's interesting. Yeah, that's one possible difference. I've noticed that. Another example will be team, a football team. So if I have my favorite team and I think of the individual players, a British person might say, my team are playing tomorrow. Whereas in American English, you're almost definitely going to say my team is playing tomorrow. Let's look at some more differences and see what you think about these. So, for example, giving directions. Now, a British person would probably use the imperative. They'd say, go down this road, turn left, go to the right, it's on your left, turn left.
Sure.
Take the next, turning on the right. Would it be acceptable for you to say you're going to go 4 blocks down the road using the going to future? You're going to see an apartment building, you're going to turn left, you're going to see a roundabout, you're going to see a traffic lights. Would you hear that in New York?
Yeah, but you would hear more of a combination of the two. So I'd say, take this exit, you're then going to see this, turn right. Go another 4 blocks, you'll then see this more as denoting a landmark or a point of reference, but then the actual instruction would still be in the imperative form.
Okay, so it'd probably be a mixture. What about differences with get, the verb get, G-E-T? I've got a couple of examples here, but can you think of any? Have you noticed any in the way I use get and the way you use get as an American speaker, American English speaker?
Not offhand that I can think of, no.
What about the third form? For example, do you think I've got older since we last saw each other? You'd probably say...
That is incorrect English.
Okay. What would you say?
Do you think I have aged? Do you think I look older? Have I gotten
yes.
older?
That's what I was searching for. You'd say gotten.
Right. Got, I was taught, is the past tense of the word get. Gotten is a different form of the verb. It's a different structure.
Okay. So you would say I've gotten, and I would say I've got.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. British usage of it. So it's get, got, but for you it's get, gotten.
Right.
Let's look at another one and see what you think of this one. for possession, using get or have for possession, you would possibly say, I have a dog, I have a car, I have a beer, I have a large family. I would say, as a British English speaker, I've got, both meaning possession. I've got a car, I've got a large house, I've got a big family.
They're both correct. I would use either.
Would you hear I've got in that sense of possession in New York?
You would probably hear more I have, but you can certainly hear or use both of them.
Okay. Shall for the future. Would you use shall for the future? As a British English speaker, I would possibly say, I shall send you an email next week. Or what should we do tomorrow? Would you say that, or just use will?
Normally we would use will. Shall is used in more formal settings.
You would use it as an American English speaker if you wanted to be more formal.
Shall? Yeah, you certainly could. But it's not something you hear day to day.
Okay, one more thing on verb tenses. What time is your flight on Friday?
9:40 a.m.
Have I already asked you that?
No.
Would you say, have I already asked you that? Or would you say, did I already ask you that? Which sounds more correct or more used to you? Which would people use more?
People would say, did I ask you that? More so than have I already asked you that?
I think with have, with the present perfect, it's more British usage. They would use that more. And perhaps American usage would use the past simple. Well and good. I'm well and I'm good. Have you noticed that difference?
Yeah, they're two different parts of speech. Good as an adjective, well as an adverb.
Well, how would you use them? What do they mean? How would you differentiate, make a difference between those two?
The food is good. It tastes good. I had a good experience. I feel well.
So you wouldn't say I feel good?
You can, yeah. I think I feel well. It might be better. People certainly do say I feel good. I'm trying to think of a case where you would use well and would not use good.
Does it sound correct to you to say you speak real good?
No. You speak well.
Okay. I'm pleased to hear you say that because I hear that a lot.
Right.
Let's move on to some idioms. So I'm going to say the idiom in British English. Try to tell me the American equivalent, and then we'll try and explain what they mean for the listeners. The idiom not to touch something with a barge pole. So you'd say, I wouldn't touch that with a barge pole.
I wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole.
Which means something repulses you, something you don't like it. You wouldn't go near it.
You wouldn't go near it. Not necessarily because it repulses you at all, more because
it could be dangerous.
Yeah, but more like opening a Pandora's box. Like, for example, you're sitting with people whom you know to have vastly different views than you on a particular subject. And somebody asks you afterwards, did you talk about X? And you could say, I wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole. I don't want to go near that. I don't want to get into that, open that Pandora's box.
That's a controversial subject. Keep
Yes.
away from it. Exactly. Right. I wouldn't touch that with a barge pole or a 10-foot pole. Next one, to sweep something under the carpet.
Under the rug.
Interesting. To sweep something under the rug, to sweep something under the carpet. I understand the difference to be a carpet usually covers the whole floor, and a rug tends to be smaller.
In American English, carpeting refers to what's called wall-to-wall installed carpeting, meaning, it's tacked down. A rug, referring to an area rug, even if it does cover the entire floor, it can be picked up. It's not attached to anything. And so you can theoretically lift up a corner of it and sweep something under it.
Exactly. And if you want good luck, you do this. How do you say that?
Knock wood.
Knock wood or knock on wood?
Knock wood.
I would say as a British English speaker, touch wood. Yeah, you knew that.
I knew that. And I also found out recently where that came from. As far as I understand, it has to do with basically touching a wooden cross for luck.
All right. Interesting. Touching a wooden cross. Next one, put a spanner in the works. If you put a spanner in the works. Do you know what a spanner is in American English? A monkey wrench or a wrench.
Oh, yeah, to throw a monkey wrench.
So if there's a situation that maybe would get more complicated, the idea of putting a spanner or throwing a wrench into the works makes it even more complicated.
Right.
Yeah.
A spanner?
A spanner.
Spanner?
Yeah. Spanner is a wrench.
Okay.
WRENCH, a monkey wrench. A skeleton in the cupboard. There's a skeleton in the cupboard. Don't talk about it.
In the closet.
In the closet. Love the accent. In the closet.
Closet.
What was the word the other day that we said differently?
COD.
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 Which is bacalao. Say it again.
Cod.
Cod.
Cod. Or cod. If you're from Boston, you would say cod.
What about if you're from Cape Cod?
Cape Cod. Cod.
Next one. A drop in the ocean.
A drop in the bucket.
Yeah.
Or, no.
Would you say a spit in the ocean?
You can say, no, never.
Okay.
You could say a drop in the ocean also, but more a drop in the bucket.
And how can we explain that? It's just a drop in the ocean. It's a very small thing in the general scope of things, in the general...
Meaning it has no particular importance or relevance.
Exactly. I couldn't care less. No me importa in Spanish.
That's used in American English.
But would you say I could care less? Or is that wrong?
I think they're both used.
Which is strange, isn't it? Because you'd think one would be right and one would be incorrect. He's coming round for lunch. Oh, he's coming round for lunch. Oh, it's going to be a problem. Oh, I couldn't care less. No me importa. Right. Me da igual.
It would be more, I couldn't care less.
I think so.
People would say.
I think so.
But I've heard people say I could care.
It's not possible, it's not conceivable, it's not possible that I could care any less. Because I don't care much at all.
Right. But I have heard people say I could care less.
Me too. But American English speakers, more so than British English speakers.
Okay.
Next one, to take something with a pinch of salt.
A grain of salt.
Un grano, yeah. To take something with a pinch of salt. And an example?
With a bit of, I don't want to say suspicion, but not necessarily 100% to be relied on for 100% accuracy.
So when our friend Sarah tells us something, what she says is not usually true. It's very exaggerated. So whatever she says, take it with a pinch of salt or take it with a grain of salt. Take it in proportion. Finally, one last one. A storm in a teacup. A storm in a teacup. Everybody is arguing at work. Everybody's worried. Maybe they're going to lose their jobs. But really, it's not a big deal. It's not a big problem. It's just a storm in a teacup. It's really a very small thing, so don't exaggerate it. Nothing's going to happen. I think in American English, you might say a tempest in a teacup. A tempest in a teacup.
I have heard that. It's
not common?
It's not overly common. No.
Okay.
At least not in my generation.
Well, Bill, thank you very much for your help with these points. Before you go, one or two general questions, because you're here visiting in Valencia. What's your impression so far of the city of Valencia? I know you've only been here for a couple of days.
I haven't seen much of the city. What I have seen of it so far, the center of town where we drove around today has this distinctly European look, which I find very appealing and very attractive. The wide boulevards, or as you Brits say, dual carriageways. The way the edifices, the buildings themselves, what they look like, the architecture, the way they're adorned on the outside remind me a lot of other European cities that I've been to. I love the fact that it's right on the water. The accessibility of the water and the beach is very pretty. It seems to have lots of different neighborhoods that seem to have their own unique character and flavor, and you've explained a little bit about some of those areas in conversation.
And hopefully we can explore some more areas tomorrow. When you think of Spain in general, let's zoom out a bit. When you think of the country of Spain, what comes to mind? Can you give us some adjectives that typically describe Spain to you?
I think it's both European and Mediterranean, which is a nice combination. I see and feel elements of both influences in the architecture, in the food, which I find very appealing. Honestly, I don't know much about Spain as a country. I've never been to Spain before.
Is this your first visit? I thought you'd been perhaps to Barcelona.
No, never been to Spain, never passed through it.
Have you been to any Latin American countries?
No. Well, I was in Mexico, but I was in Cancun, and so I had very limited exposure to the local community there.
And if you could visit one Latin American country, which would you choose to see and why?
I've heard Costa Rica is beautiful, and I know a lot of people who have gone there.
Yeah, me too.
And have visited, and they said it's an extraordinary place, and the people are friendly, and it's affordable. And so I suppose I might start with that. There are many Latin American countries that would interest me. I'd like to see Ecuador and go to the Galapagos. I'd like to go to Cuba. I'd like to see more of Mexico. I'd like to go to South America as well. Argentina and Chile particularly are both countries that interest me.
Living in New York, do you tend to hear a lot of Spanish spoken on a daily basis?
I do, but it's a very different Spanish. So when I was a kid, the predominant Spanish that I heard was Puerto Rican Spanish, because New York at that time had a very, very large and growing Puerto Rican community. My ear got familiar with the sound of the language, but it's very different from the Spanish that I hear in Spain. Very different kind of musicality to the language here. Now in New York, the predominant Spanish that I hear is more Guatemalan. Huge influx of Guatemalan and Dominican immigrants and migrants in New York. And I can discern differences in the language, although I don't understand it, but I can certainly hear differences in pronunciation and in accents. And
if somebody from one of those countries came to visit as a tourist to New York, what one thing would you recommend them to see or do while they're in the city? Obviously, they're going to go and see the Statue of Liberty and the Empire State Building, but is there anything that's typically New York that you'd say, you have to go and see that, you have to taste this food, you have to do that before you leave?
No, I cannot identify one single thing.
Just to maybe walk the streets and soak up the atmosphere?
Yeah. I mean, that, for me, when I've traveled, is what I always like to do. I feel that more than visiting any particular site, to get a feel for the place is to walk the streets and look in the stores and listen to the conversations of the people and watch what's going on around you and explore different neighborhoods. I mean, one of the things that I love about New York is that you never know what you're going to come across.
Just walking around the streets.
Just walking around, particularly in terms of food and entertainment. And when we talk about New York, I just want to specify for a minute that we're talking predominantly in this conversation about Manhattan, although New York City is much larger than Manhattan, right? But Manhattan is what most people associate with New York City. Manhattan and a lot of the rest of the city as well, every 2 or 3 blocks is another neighborhood. And you can be walking and you make a turn and all of a sudden everything is different and it looks different and it smells different, and you walk 3 more blocks in any different direction and it looks a little different again, and you just never know what you're going to come across or what you're going to find. I have come across all sorts of restaurants and bars and music establishments and art galleries and stuff like that just from being observant and noticing something and following
and
walking and following my curiosity.
I absolutely agree with that. So if you do go to New York and if you find yourself in the city, walk the streets, as Bill says, and just take it all in and just turn the corner, and I'm sure you'll see something exciting around the next corner.
And stay away from the heavily trafficked tourist areas. Like, people go to New York and they want to see Times Square. Okay, you can walk through Times Square in about 20 minutes and you've seen it. And okay, so you've seen lots of billboards and ads and all sorts of different languages. masses and masses of people from all over the place. But
take the photo and go somewhere else.
Right. But a New Yorker would never spend time in Times Square. I mean, I happen to work in Times Square, and I really don't like it. I can't wait to get out of that neighborhood. You know, I appreciate it. I understand that it's a magnet for tourists, and I'm grateful that there are plenty of tourists who come to New York and who want to be there and who want to take those pictures and buy tickets to the shows and all that other kind of stuff.
Do you have a favorite neighborhood that you like to walk around in at the moment? I know you're fond of the Village, Greenwich Village.
Yeah, I am. I like the East Village a lot. I like Tribeca, which is a shorthand for the triangle below Canal Street. Tribeca, triangle below Canal, which is a neat kind of up-and-coming neighborhood. Robert De Niro lives down there, owns a restaurant. There are a bunch of neat galleries. People may know something called the Tribeca Film Festival, which is a very, very popular and well-respected film festival in New York. At different times of year, there are different really neat things to see and vistas all over the place. I love walking across the Brooklyn Bridge, or at least out to the middle of the span, even if you don't walk all the way across. Fabulous views of New York Harbor from there, and, you know, a good swath of Manhattan Island.
Well, there you go. So if you're walking around Manhattan and you do see Robert De Niro or Bill, don't forget to say hello. Bill, thanks very much for sharing your time with us, and thanks for being on the podcast.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
It's been a pleasure. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Bill and you learned some of the differences and hopefully some new idioms that you can use. Remember, you can see some notes about the grammar differences and the idioms we mentioned in our conversation on the website at inglespodcast.com/427. But now it's your turn to practice your English. Why don't you send us a voice message and tell us what you thought of the episode? And if you have any questions in general about English, we'll be happy to help you. You can send us a message on SpeakPipe. Go to speakpipe.com, speakpipe.com/inglespodcast. If you prefer email, you can reach me. I'm Craig, Craig, at inglespodcast.com. And to send an email to Reza, write to belfastreza, Reza, at gmail.com. On the Mention English website, you can buy courses to help you with your English. Go to store.mencioningles.net. And don't forget my 6-week conversation masterclass that we'll be doing on Zoom starting on August the 16th. For more details, go to englishmasterclass.net and join our email list. I'll be contacting you very soon with more details. Before I go out the door this week, I want to thank all of you who are helping us by supporting this podcast on Patreon. And you too can become a Patreon member for as little as $1.20 per month. When you do that, we send you every week transcriptions of the podcast so that you can read as you listen and see every word that we say. For more information, go to patreon.com, patreon.com/inglespodcast. Now, unfortunately, there isn't time to thank everybody individually who is supporting us, but just to mention our latest Patreon supporters who have joined us recently. They are Judith Honfi, Alberto Valverde Conde, Jorge Alberto Borda, Miguel Salazar, Oscar Niera, and Maite Moreno. Thank you very much to you and to everybody who is supporting us over on Patreon. I don't know if Reza will be back in time to record next week's podcast, but whatever happens, there will definitely be a podcast for you next week. Thank you for listening this week. Take care. Have a wonderful week. And if you did enjoy this podcast, please tell one of your friends. The music in this podcast is by Pitts. The track is called See You Later.